Kind day to you all, I'm Kinsmark, and I'm kind of selective when it comes to my taste in MMOs. I've criticized the genre standard control scheme, the formula, etc., and I tend to lose interest in such titles rather quickly. However, I still like the idea of MMOs, as I always have, and so I'm often rather intrigued when a new one comes along and shakes up the status quo with a re-envisioned approach to this genre. So it is with Skyforge, an action MMO with a real-time combat system, an absolutely gorgeous art style, a class system that's adaptable and flexible, allowing one to change class at any time, instanced missions with the options and I can only assume adjusted challenges to attempt either solo or cooperative runs, and a science fantasy setting called Aeon, in which players adopt the role of an immortal, a conduit of divine power, one of many charged with the mission of protecting their world from the corruption and conflict of the invading armies of rival gods. Alod's team, in collaboration with Obsidian Entertainment, have worked on Skyforge since 2010, and its closed beta recently opened up for all the world to forge their own immortal paths to apotheosis. I've since played Skyforge for several hours at this stage, enough to feel as though I could relay a coherent account of my first impressions with the game. And as first impressions go, it's hard to compete with Skyforge's. Right away, prior to anything else, even a main menu screen, I was greeted with an options menu, from which I could adjust volume settings, resolution, etc. An exemplary illustration in menu priorities, especially compared to many other MMOs. Competitive developers, take note. This is how you design player-friendly introductory menus. After the title screen, a crisp and cinematic cutscene introduces one to their character as they arrive in the capital city of Elenar, where one is immediately set to meet Herida, advisor goddess of the immortals and the source of one's introductory quests, or as I like to call her, Goddess Sensei. I'm actually very impressed with the visual fidelity of Skyforge's rendering, although I can't help noting that the camera keeps repeating the same panning shot for every single segment of dialogue. And the voice acting isn't as impressive as the visuals, I'm sorry to say.
Aside from me, no one's even trying to.
As Herida asks the character to recount their story, and I can only assume she means how I ascended to immortality, I immediately revert to a flashback, and along with it my first chance at actual combat, in which I learned that I was apparently some kind of space Spartan, complete with slow-mo side-angle camera shots and some fairly impressive choreography as in-engine MMO cutscenes go. The combat itself is simple, approachable, and satisfying, relying at least at this stage primarily upon melee combos. One can continuously click left-click to keep attacking in a lengthy combo, or one can right-click after any given number of attacks to execute a variety of special attacks, a la Kingdoms of Amalur or Vindictus. A little later, one can start adding special cooldown abilities from a hot menu to the mix, many setting one up for follow-up attacks or requiring some fairly specific timing or positioning, incrementally adding complexity to the system over time. As for the task at hand, I have a mission to clear the town of Ionor of the creepy rat creatures that have apparently invaded it, a mission I complete with honor, and am rewarded with a heroic death at the hands of a reinforcing horde at the command of a creepy necromancer for. Yay. I reawaken shortly thereafter, however, glowing with the power of plot atop a pile of my comrades' corpses, and fight my way through conspicuously well-lit catacombs infested with more scythe-wielding rat-men, and confront the necromancer, Reaper of Death, at the end of a long corridor. And as one might expect from a man of his apparent taste in facial tattoos, he summons yet another horde of space New York sewer rats to kill me. Again. Harder this time, I guess. I've apparently studied the Link School of Combat, however, and just as it seems I'm about to join the Re-Dead, execute a spinning attack explosion, evening the odds and setting the stage for the fight with Tatman. As one might imagine, it doesn't go well for him, and as his corpse hits the floor, the flashback concludes. A little consolation from Goddess Sensei later, I'm sent to meet another immortal named Flavius. Yeah, you heard that right. Who conducts me through a mercifully short and simple class training tutorial, and I pick one of 3 starting classes. One can apparently change classes at any time, as Skyforge's progression system relies upon a character's overall prestige ranking to determine one's power, rather than a conventional character level system. One can currently choose from 13 character classes. The Cryomancer, Paladin, and Lightbinder, the starters, and the alchemist, archer, berserker, gunner, kinetic, knight, monk, necromancer, slayer, and warlock, or witch for the ladies, as one earns access to them along certain paths of progression. And the ability tree itself, while linear at first, allows one to start specializing organically as one plays, in an almost sphere grid-like fashion, allowing one a sense of choice and flexibility unheard of in many other MMOs. I wonder whether there are indeed more optimized paths one might take through the ability trees, although I simply lack the requisite experience to come up with even slightly educated conjecture on the subject at this stage. As for my starting selection, I've chosen the Paladin class, as I'm a sucker for swords and I'm too impulsive to play a support class. At least I'm honest, alright? After class selection, I'm finally allowed the moment I've awaited since the start, a chance to customize my character. And as compared to other titles' character customization systems, Skyforge's is adequately robust, if not exactly standout, along with the usual range of physique and facial options, such as gender selection, frame type, muscularity, coloration, hairstyle, voice, and an acceptable range of facial sliders. Skyforge does a few things which I've never seen in any other game, such as a proportion slider affecting how high one's hips and shoulders sit on one's frame, and therefore how lanky or stocky one is, and a run animation slider, affecting a character's posture while running, from hunched over and aggressive at the heavy end of the spectrum to upright and athletic at the light end. One can also select a set of starting clothes and cosmetic accoutrements like jewelry, headwear, and tattoos, and even return to the customization menu to change things later at any time. Once I'd concluded my customization, I was off to meet with Goddess Sensei in the Jedi Library once again. Seriously, you can't fool me, I know where the inspiration for that environment came from. Who explains that we immortals are essentially like divine superheroes, answering the call of the millions of mortals who follow us across the world, and that it's their faith which grants us strength. At this stage, it seems I've finally reached the point of introduction to what one can expect the actual structure of the game to resemble, accepting instanced missions from the holographic map in the center of the Divine Observatory, the hub of immortal power on Aelion, and I set off from the world map on my first combat mission. The short of it is, I learned that the creepy rat creatures I've to thank for my immortality are called Verds, and that they've recently nested in a region just outside several settlements which have apparently come under attack from them. I'm to kill their carrion leader, scatter them to their burrows, and then collapse their own tunnels upon them with explosives, sealing them within their own conveniently pre-dug graves. I approve of this plan. I was a little lost as to what I should actually do at first, though I soon realized that colored areas on my minimap indicated where I could find quest objectives, and it all fell into place naturally from there. As for the instanced map design, it's fairly linear and yet manages not to feel cramped and already introduces one to just how gorgeous this game can look. Skyforge is a very pretty game. And more than once, and not just in this instance, I caught myself staring out at the environments and simply admiring them for the view. One mini-boss fight and several collapsed Verd lairs later, however, my mission was complete, and—
Hold up! You're forgetting the terrifying part!
And
Seriously!
Right. I must have repressed the memory. Apparently, in our infinite wisdom and apparent appreciation for technological anachronism, we immortals in our Techno-Heaven Observatory employ a communications support system, an AI, I assume, called the Argus system, whose mechanical voice chimes in to inform one of various tooltips from time to time as one completes various tasks, and I swear she is straight up GLaDOS! Seriously, listen to this!
The pieces of equipment that you will find on your adventures might make you more powerful, or they might not. Life is a lottery.
And as if that weren't unsettling enough, my next mission sends me straight to a factory that's come under attack from its own machines and started churning out more of them at an alarming rate. As per the previous mission, I cut through a few hordes of weak enemies on a pretty linear path toward the end of the instance, face off with a couple of mini-bosses, and then walk in on another Reaper of Death in some kind of control room, apparently on a holo call with his Sith Master, who instructs him to destroy the factory with himself inside it so that all goes according to plan. Naturally, I throw an immortal wrench into the gears of that plan and find that this fight requires some wave survival to activate a series of panels around the room in order to deactivate the shield keeping my sword from replacing his spine. I had a little issue with it at first, and actually started encountering the first real challenge in the game from this fight, though once I adapted my strategy to something a little more cautious, I came out the victor once again. At this stage, I'd learned a few of the subsystems at work in Skyforge, how to upgrade equipment, what the various resources I'd accrued were for, how to cannibalize excess equipment to generate more enhancement stones for additional upgrades, etc., etc. And yet, if I'm completely honest, I still felt a little lost, especially where some of the upgrade systems were concerned, so it seems that Skyforge could do with a somewhat more detailed tutorial for some of these systems so that players aren't coming away confused. I was confident enough to continue on to my third mission, however, a port city under siege from some kind of amphibious lizard folk and aquatic Merilith monsters, and I'm to clear a path to the port for the people of the city to evacuate. As with the previous missions, objectives are fairly cut and dry: kill X creatures, destroy X number of egg clutches, and it culminates in a multi-stage confrontation with a series of boss creatures. The first couple are a tag team of sub-bosses, one of which calls up a shield periodically, during which I've little choice than to focus on the other, forcing me to stay mobile.
Mars has brought up his shield. Now he's nearly invincible. I advise you to switch to Agira.
Thanks, GLaDOS!
And the final fight pits me up against a giant Merilith, sorry, Naiad, and applies several of the lessons from previous fights at once, providing a pretty significant challenge. As I return from the field of combat, Goddess Sensei sends word that I'm expected to meet with her. As it turns out, the necromancer master I encountered in the previous mission is called the Gravedigger.
Lame!
I'm not entirely sure how or when I learned his name, or why I'm apparently, according to Goddess Sensei, the only one who ever regarded him as a threat. I mean, come on guys. Scythe. Though it seems he's a dire enough problem now to warrant a visit from the cutting edge of the Immortal's sword, the Goddess Iana, who, after a predictably dramatic entrance, sets me to the task of chasing down and capturing the Gravedigger himself. And that, I'm afraid, aside from a few repeat forays into the same missions to assess the challenge of cooperative play, which, for the record, actually seems fairly comparable to that of solo play, is where my experience with Skyforge ends. And I suppose the most compelling thing I can say after all of that is, as often as I've lost interest in MMOs in the past, I actually want to keep playing this game. It's managed to hook me in a way few other MMOs have, and I think it's thanks in large part to Allodd's willingness to shake up the standard genre formula. Even one's equipment and the accompanying in-game market are somewhat different from most MMOs, as one's primary gear is comprised of one's weapons, trophies, amulets, and rings. Armor doesn't seem to factor in, leaving one to customize one's appearance at will without mechanical repercussion. Thankfully, one can also preview outfits within the market prior to purchasing them, and each one seems to come in a reasonable variety of color options. And as for the model of the game itself, Skyforge is free to play! A cash shop does exist, however it's limited, at least as far as I can tell, to a premium membership, which simply grants a passive 50% increase to one's resource accrual rate and access to free teleportation, and to some cosmetic items, nothing too concerning at all. I know I've hardly scratched the surface of Skyforge, as it can take hundreds of hours to take the full measure of any MMO, and yet, as far as first impressions are concerned, I am very impressed, and while I am a little concerned that its missions might get a little repetitive as it wears on, I've yet to encounter enough repetition to keep me away. I can't assign it a numerical score, as I've yet to form a comprehensive critique for the game. However, I can certainly recommend this game to veterans and newcomers to the MMO genre alike, as it may very well appeal to veteran players searching for a little something new, and to those who've yet to find a standard fare MMO they enjoy, such as myself. One can download the Skyforge client from its official website, which I've linked for your convenience in the description of this video, and I remind you it is free to play, so check it out if you're at all interested. And with that, thank you all kindly for watching. I am Kinsmark here at Last Level Press, and as always, I wish you all good gaming, and Godspeed.